Hello, I'm Commissioner Kevin Cameron, your host today for Emergency Preparedness segment. And we're going to start the show off with a video that is titled, "It Started Like Any Other Day." To get us started, you can now watch the video and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more.
It started as any other day. I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was. You never know what can happen. Unforgettable. There was heavy rain to the point where you couldn't even see.
All you could hear stuff around you being smashed and crashed. Huge things that you would think would never move, and they were being thrown around like it was a toy. It was devastating. The power of the water, it'll eat you up in a second.
The most frightening moment would be the concern that you have for your children, making sure that they were okay.
We didn't know what to do. It was terrifying.
We were actually without power for 4 weeks. It was the whole town of Scotch Plains without power. It became too cold where we couldn't even stay in the house.
We were freezing cold and we would sleep in the car.
With the heat on, shut it off once the car got warm enough. That's how we were able to fall asleep.
You couldn't really ignore what was going on around you. You really just see how much everyone cared for each other in this community.
The dangers of Mother Nature, you don't know where it's going to hit or how it's going to hit.
So you just have to prepare yourself mentally. Being that you don't know the outcome, you could be prepared for whatever does happen.
We had an EF5 tornado, as devastating as they come.
You can't go back to who you were when you experienced such a trauma. It changes you fundamentally as a person. Because I'd never seen a tornado, it never occurred to me that this big, massive thing with no definitive boundaries was a tornado. And so we ran down into the shelter and locked it. We had not even been down there a minute. You could hear people screaming. It just sounds like this really loud train coming through.
We had a damaged path that was a half-mile wide, and within that half-mile, it was total destruction. There was very little left.
With an autistic child, the most we can do is prepare the best we can, educate ourselves, and have faith. The worst part for us was that my daughter's asthmatic, and in all the panic, she was having a really bad asthma attack. I didn't have any way to get my daughter a breathing treatment. You think, I'll pack a bag and keep it by the door. It never occurs to you you're not gonna have that 5 to 10 minutes to go grab the bag. We were left with 3 cans of green beans, 2 diapers, and a bottle of water about like this.
People sometimes don't take action because they have decided that it's not going to happen to me. People in our city have learned that it does happen, and it can happen to us. When people receive warning, they need to take action.
At one point, we drove underneath the smoke, and the smoke was blocking out the sun. You could see just this giant cloud of smoke just rapidly approaching our home. I knew that was not a good sign. My dad said, the house burned down, everything is lost. I saw this as a definite end to my childhood.
For the average person, the sensation that they're going to experience during a fire is often overwhelming. Their eyes begin to burn, their heart rate increases, the trees around their homes begin to catch fire, parts of their homes begin to melt, they begin to panic.
It was monstrous. For my family, it was, how do we rebuild everything that we've lost? How do we find a normalcy again? And how do we make somewhere else our home?
Personal preparedness, not just for a wildfire, a tornado, or an earthquake, but to be prepared for 24, 48, and 72 hours on your own is really vital throughout the country. Natural disasters occur. That's just the way of life. If you haven't been affected, you will.
Well, welcome back. I'm here with Ed Flick, Marion County's emergency manager, and Ed, today started just like any other day. Welcome. It's good to have you here with us to talk about emergency preparedness in Marion County.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's a great opportunity. This is National Preparedness Month, and so it's a very timely topic.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your experience and how you ended up here at Marion County and how you're applying that in your current job?
Commissioner, I've been in the county for just a little over a year. Before that, I was on active duty in the Army, and
thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure. My wife and I both graduated from Western and went off 24 years ago, and when it came time to think about life after the military, we wanted to come back to our community, and I saw this as an opportunity to serve. Over the course of my service overseas, I had the opportunity to be involved in some disaster response, and so it's an area that I think I can bring some experience back to the county.
Well, great. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your mission as the Emergency Management Department and your leadership there?
The mission of the Emergency Management Office in Marion County is simple. We're here to identify hazards, identify ways we can mitigate the effects of those hazards, and really to build the capability and capacity of the county and our partners to be prepared to respond at a moment's notice should an emergency or a disaster strike.
Great. So right now, some of the talk you see in the newspaper, in fact, the New York Times, the big one right here in the Northwest and all the way from California to Canada to Alaska is predicted to happen. In fact, I was a participant in a workshop just not too long ago. They talked about maybe, you know, the chances of that happening are pretty good now, anytime in the future. So why don't you tell us about some of those hazards that you predict, you know, obviously the earthquake, but that and other hazards that you would be looking at that as emergency preparedness for Marion County?
Of course. The first hazard that always comes to mind here in the Mid-Willamette Valley is flooding. It's a hazard that presents almost every year, and it's one that the county must absolutely be prepared to respond to. Going back to 2012, it affected Salem, it affected Turner, even out to Silverton. So we never take our eye off that hazard. There's been a lot of good mitigation activities since 2012 that prepare the community to be more ready for flooding. You mentioned the earthquake. I never thought about earthquakes when I lived here going to college. And it's really only been since the late 90s that people started to think about earthquakes. There was, of course, the spring break quake that reminded us that earthquakes can happen in the valley. But the subduction zone earthquake is a different kind of hazard. It's different in the magnitude, in the duration. And you only have to go back to what happened in Japan or another event that I was involved in 2004 in the Indian Ocean to see what these kind of earthquakes can do. While we expect most of that damage will occur first and principally along the coast with the resulting tsunami, we can expect here in the Willamette Valley to have really significant damages, and it's really causing the entire emergency management community to think beyond flooding and really think about how can we work collectively to respond to something of that magnitude.
Yeah. So before I bring the subject up, if you were an individual out there watching this program, how could the individual or how could our community prepare for something like that? What are some things individuals could do for being prepared for something of that magnitude?
The first and foremost thing that any individual can do is to think about their own individual preparedness and the preparedness in their household. My colleague Krista will be talking about that. But as you work out from there, we need to be thinking about how we can respond to this kind of an event as a community, because it's really going to take the whole community. There's simply not enough firefighters and police and public works workers to respond everywhere at the same time. So we talk about being prepared at home. For a long time, you heard about that being a 72-hour kit.
Right.
Well, our mission now is to really spread the word. 72 hours is not going to be enough. So we talk about 2 weeks. And as you think about what it would take to sustain yourself and your family and your friends in your neighborhood you got to think about 2 weeks in preparedness.
Wow. Okay, great. What's the county doing to prepare for some of these potential disasters? And I know you and I just recently were up in Little North Fork talking about a situation up there, a potential fire.
That's right. The county is adopting a whole of community approach, and that means addressing preparedness at the community level. And hazards aren't the same everywhere in the county. Certainly with the drier weather, we see drought and forest fire in addition to flooding. But the more we can get out and engage with the community and encourage them to be partners with us, the more successful we'll be. Otherwise, the county's going to be doing a lot of planning this year, really taking on board the information that we've learned about the Cascadia hazard and thinking about how we can build networks of response with public and private partners. In particular, we're working with the private volunteer sector, and we have a Marion Polk Community Organizations Active in Disasters, which is bringing in that whole community partnership that we're going to need. And also, we started a recent dialogue with SEDCOR and talking about how we can build business continuity.
Great. So you mentioned in that last statement about a emergency that creeps up on us, the drought, which you and I have been paying a lot of attention to. And I know you've done some great work this year, and I really appreciate the things you've done, everywhere from preparing St. Paul in case their wells run dry for domestic water supply, and watching the Army Corps and those types of things. So Ed, I just really want to thank you for your service to the citizens out there, and you've been a real asset since you've been here to Marion County. So thank you very much for being with us today and for the service you're giving to the citizens of Marion County.
Well, it's been my
great to have
pleasure.
you.
Thank you,
Good.
Commissioner.
Okay. Well, hello again. I'm Commissioner Kevin Cameron. I'm here with Krista Rowland, who is the program coordinator in Marion County's Emergency Management Department. And welcome, Krista.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your, what you've done in your life and maybe your job currently to prepare you for the things that you're doing to serve our citizens.
Okay, so I've worked for Marion County for 18 years, and the last 13 have been in emergency management. I didn't come with a lot of experience because I was very young when I started at Marion County. And when the
You must have been 13 when you
I
started.
was,
Okay,
actually.
good.
That's a really good guess. And my predecessor wanted to retire, and they asked me to fill in, and I filled in, and then I just ended up staying in the position. So I've learned since I've been there. I've taken many trainings, I've earned certificates, and I've really dove into the subject matter because it really is very interesting.
Great, we're glad to have you. And this is one of those topics I always tell people, safety first and last. And we don't think sometimes, we just go about our life,
Right.
and we take a lot of things for granted. And one of the things that I'd like you to explain to people is what can they do to prepare for some of the potential emergencies that we may have, as Ed Flick described some of those. What can they do as individuals?
Well, there's a few things that they can do. There's a rule of thumb of stay informed, build a kit, and make a plan. So staying informed would involve having a battery-operated radio in case there's no electricity. Then they would be able to hear what's on the radio, what's on the TV if there is electricity. We also have a system that does reverse calling. So the 911 centers can actually call these folks who have home phone numbers and let them know that something is going on in their community. And you can sign up through that through Metcom 911. It's metcom911.com, and you can sign up for citizen alerts. We're also on social media, and that's on Twitter and Facebook. If you look up Marion County Emergency Management on Facebook, and on Twitter we are Marion County EM, and I post all kinds of information that's keeping people informed. The second thing is having a kit, and that's going to start with just the basics, and that's food, water, and shelter. So for instance, food, you want foods that are durable with a lot of protein and could have a longer shelf life to be able to keep that in your cupboard. Water, this would be rotated in your regular water that you use. I think sometimes water lasts up to a couple years, but you want to make sure you keep that rotated. And the rule of thumb is 1 gallon per person per day, and that's half for drinking and half for hygiene. Then from there on, you just want to basically get your kit, you're going to personalize it. So if you have animals, you want to put animal stuff in there. If you have young children, there'll be diapers, formula, medications, and go from your basics and then start building it so that it's more apt to what you need in your kit. And the last one was making a plan, and that's having a communication plan with your family, how you're going to get in touch with each other, if the phone systems aren't working, where your meeting place is, your gathering place, and that's planning out how you're going to meet and get together and know that everybody is safe in the event of an emergency.
Sure. You mentioned water. One of the things that we have in our both places where we spend a lot of time is the 5-gallon, what do you call them,
Like
sparklets
this-
bottles
yeah.
or whatever. Right. So having plenty of water to do that. So what would you say Ed mentioned it used to be 72 hours, now it's 2 weeks. And as you were sharing some of the food, I know my fellow Commissioner Brentano would probably need a little more candy or whatever those energy bars are than I would. So is there special, and I say that teasingly, but is there special needs things that you want to think about? Medications, dietary things, and
absolutely make sure that you make your kit personalized for you. So if you have young children, you want to make sure that maybe there's fruit snacks in there, something that for them that they're not going to want to always eat the same things that the parents eat. There is also medications, and make sure you have a couple extra on hand. If you're not able to get it filled more than 30 days out, then just take one each month and get a supply of those. And that's especially if you have life safety issues because of that medication. Then there's diabetic, it's all the same. If you need something special in that kit, make sure you have that stored away so that you will have that. And we do talk about a 2-week kit, because 72 hours we've decided just isn't going to be long enough. And with the not having water or electricity or access to food because the transportation routes are snarled up, then you definitely want to be able to be self-sufficient for at least 2 weeks before professional help can get to you.
Sure. And then what else can we do? I think we have an opportunity to practice coming up here, or maybe by time people are watching this it had already passed, but there's an event coming that maybe would be a good opportunity.
Absolutely, there is. It's called the Great Shakeout, and you can go to greatshakeout.com/Oregon, I believe is what it is, and you can sign up and let folks know that you're going to be participating in this. And it is one of the world's largest exercises, and there's millions of people that are involved in this. And basically what you do is you duck, cover, and hold, and practice being safe in an earthquake. And then, for instance, our department, we're going to be evacuating afterwards. So that's a good way to practice how you're going to respond when there's an earthquake.
Good. One of the things you mentioned earlier in our conversation was the reverse, I'm going to say reverse 911 because that's what I think of. It's basically the 911 service calling my house.
It is.
Landlines are automatically signed up for that,
Correct.
from what I understand. And you were talking about most people, a lot of people are getting rid of their landlines, but you want to say again where I can go to register my cell phone so I would get that phone call so people will know that?
Yes, absolutely. It's Metcom, METCOM 911, those are the numbers, .com. And you'll see an icon on there that says Citizen Alerts. And you can let them know where you live, how you want to be notified, whether it's cell phone first, email second, whatever have you. That's the easiest way to get in touch with you. They also accept text messages, and then you can get alerted to things that are going on, emergencies that are going on within your community.
Great. Well, Krista, thank you very much for your service to the citizens of Marion County and the things you've educated me, myself, as well as those that are watching today on how we can individually be more prepared in the event of emergency. And let's hope we don't have to
Yes.
do it, but if we're prepared, it'll make a big difference
Absolutely.
in the amount of survivals and the reduction in injuries. So thank you
Yes.
for what you do.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
When the earth shakes, the ground moves, and things start to fall, you'll ask yourself, how prepared or unprepared are you? Have you removed objects from over the bed and over your head? Anchored your possessions securely to the wall. It won't be a pain, and you're not doing it in vain. Are your emergency kits packed? What about your family, your friends? Do they know what to do, how to get in touch, and where to meet? Do you know how to drop, cover, and hold on, covering your head and neck. What if you're outside? Or in a car? After the shaking stops, look around. Figure out what to do. Stay away from damaged areas. Turn on a radio. Reach out for help. And if you're trapped, do not move about. Stay calm. Only shout as a last resort. Once everything and everyone is safe, get prepared. An aftershock could be on its way. So before the earth shakes, the ground moves, and things start to fall, get prepared. Make a plan. Practice what you know, because an earthquake can happen anytime, anywhere. You never know. America's Prepare-a-thon. Be smart. Take part. Prepare.
Well, welcome back after watching The Earth Shakes. I'm here now with Paul Guthrie, who is part of our amateur radio emergency service and a CERT member, the community emergency response team. Paul, welcome. And with Eric Anderson from our emergency management department, who is our community coordinator. So welcome both of you to the program today.
Thanks for having us.
Good to have you. So Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, and your job today and what you do?
Okay. I started in the fire service about around 2000 as a volunteer firefighter. I worked my way up the ranks to lieutenant. Then I got a job in emergency services working on an ambulance. I did that for a couple of years.
Great.
And after doing that for a while, I kind of saw how important it was to be prepared and how different things that people encounter, fires, tornadoes, earthquakes, and saw a lot of that on the news. So I knew that there was a bigger picture out there than just a local scope or a local approach to things. So I started looking into emergency management, and that's when I met my colleague Krista, and she kind of informed me more what emergency management entails. So then I ended up getting hired with the county, and like you said, I'm a community coordinator, so I do volunteers. And trying to get the word out to the public as to how everybody can be prepared for what they might encounter.
Good. And Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you're here, why you're here today?
I grew up in North Portland, and as a third grader, about 10 boys in the neighborhood and I started hiking across the St. John's Bridge and doing 2-night campouts in the what's now Forest Park. In the 7th grade, I moved to Seattle and got involved in sailboat racing, mountain climbing, skiing, skied on the ski patrol, taught skiing, and graduated in forestry, spent a couple years in the Army as a infantry lieutenant, mountain ranger instructor.
Thank you for your service.
And then spent about 10 years as a timber cruiser, counting trees, spending a lot of time in the woods. Spent 2 years as a community college forestry instructor here at Chemeketa, and then another 35 years as an institutional research specialist. And during that time was a Boy Scout leader, taking 30 to 50 boys and 10 to 15 adults on weekend campouts and summer camp. After my boys were well out of the program, took the CERT class and got involved with that as a trainer and with the amateur radio emergency service for since 2007.
So you've been a volunteer in a lot of areas. I got to come out and visit a year ago, June I believe it was. Why don't you tell us about some of the activities you do with Marion County now as a volunteer in the radio side?
The two areas that I'm involved in, actually three. The CERT program is a community emergency response team. It's a neighborhood-based group that is part of the Citizen Corps family of programs for community preparedness. Krista had mentioned the two-week preparedness, and this is a group of volunteers that go through a 21-hour training program to become basically trained in CERT, to be personally prepared their family, and then deploying themselves in the neighborhood to help their neighbors. The amateur radio service is a national program. It's implemented in Oregon at the county level, and it provides emergency backup communications to, in our case, we are with the Marion County Emergency Management, and so we provide auxiliary communications for them in the event that normal communications fails.
Sure. And I got to experience that when you actually sent me an email from the radio. I thought that was pretty cool. Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the other volunteer opportunities, and then how do people get involved if they're interested in plugging in as a volunteer?
Sure. Besides the community emergency response teams, we also have, like Paul mentioned, ARES, Amateur Radio Emergency Services, as well as the Medical Reserve Corps. Medical Reserve Corps consists of doctors, nurses, EMTs, paramedics, CNAs, anybody with medical training, or anybody that has a medical interest. And we go through, we meet quarterly, we go through, we do training. We also talk about personal preparedness and what we can do to be prepared, and so that when the disaster happens, we can go out into the community and we can augment existing services. So we can help out the fire departments, we can help out the doctors, the nurses, the hospitals, the clinics. So that's something that we've been doing a lot with these events that we've been doing throughout the year. We've been out at St. Paul Rodeo. We've helped the fire district out there, out at Oktoberfest last week. We were out at the Great Oregon Steam Up in Brooks. So we've been doing a lot of activities, and this is a good test for our volunteers to deploy out throughout the county and to give them a task and to practice their services. So
Great. So if I wanted to get involved, where would I go? Who would I talk to? Is there a phone number? Is there a website?
The best thing you can do if you have any interest in volunteering is to check out the Marion County website. Under Emergency Management, there's a subsection of volunteer opportunities. You can also shoot me an email or give me a call anytime. I'll gladly walk you through the application process.
Great. And I think, Paul, you said that there's an event coming up with the radios, I believe. October.
We have a simulated emergency test with the Amateur Radio Emergency Service at least twice a year, typically in October or November, and then again in April. Our next one is October 10th. It'll be a Saturday. It'll be held at Marion County Public Works, and it'll be a simulation of a continuity of operations plan if the building was not occupiable.
Good. So that's October 10th, and that's out on Silverton, just past Corden Road. So
correct.
We just want to thank you both for being here today. Thank you for your service as a volunteer and your background in our country, your service to our country. And Eric, thank you for what you're doing to help Marion County as a staff person. And we want to thank you for watching the program today. And we hope as a result of this that you as individuals are more prepared and our community is more prepared in the event that we have an emergency. Thank you very much.